Moldavian winters are harsh. As snow piles up around the city and ice fills the harbour, trade grinds to a halt and the city seals its gates. Citizens willing to brave the cold still gather in local taverns and fest halls, but few venture outside the city walls. Let's do this. So, welcome to my session. Today we're going to be using a bit of software called Pro Tools, and we are going to be looking at how I've created the 4 different seasons within Waterdeep for the Dragon Heist campaign, and how I've tried to keep the cities feeling the same but changing throughout the seasons. So it still feels like you're in Waterdeep, but it feels like you're in Waterdeep at a different time of the year. Now, what I have throughout this session is I've created a load of tracks that have different elements of the city within them. So these top few tracks, these ones have busy city streets. So if I play a sample, so those are very similar sort of sounding samples. I'm very used to just reading waveforms without even having to listen to what they sound like. That's just something I've picked up over the years of doing this. So what you can see with all these different ones is there's different loud sections at different times. I mean, these aren't necessarily big hits, but they're sections where something big happens. So this selection I've got is a 2-minute selection here. So this little hit here it was that little bang in the background. So each one of these is taken from Boom Library's Medieval Life Pack, which is a pack anyone can go out and purchase, and I've taken a sample of each of the city and town medieval areas, just brought them all into my session and chopped them up a bit so that they will seamlessly loop one after another after another after another. So everything in this one, each of these is the same loop. So that's the same as that. But each track has a different sample within it. Aside from all the regular city stuff, I've got marketplaces. And another type of marketplace. Smaller marketplace. Larger marketplace. Yeah, so that's what I have to build up Waterdeep. I've taken a load of city streets and a load of marketplaces, thrown them all together and mixed them with a little bit of sea in the background. So you can hear the port in the distance. Now if I flip to the other screen, these are all the faders for each of those tracks. So each of these, so busy one is busy one here and so forth as we go across. And this allows me to put in different effects and equalization within it. Each of these is sent through what's called a bus, and those buses take all the audio, anything that goes to bus 7 and 8, which is all of these sparse city tracks. They appear in bus 7 and 8, and I can control the entire thing with just one fader. And it allows me to put an equalization or a compressor or any sort of effect I want to put on it. I can add specifically to that track or that collection of tracks. So that's all the parts that I've put together for Waterdeep. The city will always have all this stuff within it. It'll always have the people and the markets and the waves. So if I give a play, so this is the generic Waterdeep. It's got a certain amount of people in it, a certain amount of market activity, and a certain sound coming from the docks. Now if I play it and I pull down the amount of people, you see Waterdeep starts to sound a bit quieter. Now if I pull down the market and push back up the people, so you can hear that I can change the level of activity within the entire place. If I wanted to go even further, which we will later on in this video, I can start muting some of these tracks or pushing up the levels of different ones. So the next thing we need to do is take a look at what we're actually trying to create. This is from the book itself. It's a image of Waterdeep within the winter. So what we've got to work off is this image and the text from the book, which I read out earlier. What's quite specific about it is that trade grinds to a halt, the citizens gather inside local taverns, no one ventures outside the walls, and ice fills the harbour. These are the things we have to sort of pay attention to, is that there's going to be a lot less people on the streets. Trade and commerce are going to grind to a halt, and the sea freezes over. What that's going to mean, with the sea frozen over, we're going to get rid of our dock sound, because there's going to be no waves crashing there. With our market, I think we're not going to entirely get rid of it, because it'll stop feeling like a city. But we'll certainly pull it down quite a lot. As for the people, let's get rid of the busy people. If we mute these busy tracks. Something like that, I think. Our marketplace is still there in the background, very quietly, and we've removed a lot of the people from Waterdeep. But now we have a very quiet sounding city. We'll get the volume back afterwards. But now that we've got the city having ground to a halt, and we've removed the sound of the waves, we now need to look at bringing in the weather, making it feel cold. The tricky part of this, especially for the winter one, is when you're doing springtime or summertime, you can put in birds, you can put in children playing and laughing and things. When you're doing autumn, you can put in the sound of rain falling. When you get to winter, you can't really put in the sound of snow falling, because snow doesn't make much of a sound. What you can do is bring in the sounds of activity within snow, so snow being moved. You can also bring in the feeling of it being cold, which is often done with the sound of a harsh wind. So I'm going to go and load in a few clips, then we'll jump back into it. Okay, so I've gone through my library and I found a couple of sounds that I think are going to help us finish the feel of this wintry soundscape. The first one is footsteps in snow. A few of those dropped in should help us out. This is horse footsteps. These are in smaller sections. There's a horse cantering past in the snow. Next is some strong wind. Nice lot of howling and whistling within that. And we have another section of wind. That's got a nice bassy element, which I think is going to bring a lot to this piece. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to reorder these so I can keep my head around what's where. Now, the way I made a lot of these loops earlier, sessions ago, so if you look at the beginning of this one, it fades in and it fades out at the end. So we're going to notice that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it back from either end until it's full volume. And then I'm going to split it in the middle and move it so that the ends overlap, and put a fade so that these ends fluidly cross over. Lovely. I'm going to make it a group so that it'll all move as one block. And now if I drag this all the way to the start, when I pull across with this little symbol on it, what we get is a loop from there. So we're going to take this, we're going to drag it out across the entire timeline. And then we're going to do a similar thing with the other wind. Now this doesn't fade as much, but it's still become my standard practice to do this. Now you'll notice that this clip is slightly shorter than this one. And this will help us quite a lot in creating such a long piece with looping elements within it. When this loops for the second time, it'll be shorter and shorter again. So these loops will never loop at the same time. So with them looping at different times, we're not just going to get a 1 minute repetitive thing. You'll have sounds that'll repeat, but they won't be repeating with other sounds. So the whole soundscape will constantly be changing. What we're going to do now this is our foot horse steps. And I'm going to split it into what we can see is 4 samples of horse footsteps. I'm going to add a little fade on the end, so they'll fade in and out at a nicer pace. And then we're going to spread them out. Horses don't come past that often. So over the space of 8.5 minutes, we have those horse samples. Now if I group this and loop, drag it the entire way, and it is full. Now, here's a fun problem. This is quite a technical audio thing. As we can see with the other waveforms, we'll have a central line all the way through it, and the waves go up and down off that central line. See here, they go up and down and up and down. This one, the whole thing is offset, which causes a bit of a weird thing to happen when you play it back. How sound works, essentially, is you'll notice that your speaker will move when you're listening to sounds. So what it's telling it to do is this top half will be out from its normal point, and this bottom half will be in from its normal point. So as it's moving along, it's telling the speaker to go out this far, pull back in a little bit, go out, pull back in, past these lines and down. And you'll see that it's basically going up and down most of the way. So your speaker is going in and out, and it's pushing the air and pulling the air and creating compressions and gaps within the air, and that's how sound works. What this is doing is it's making your speaker work at an angle that it doesn't really want to be working at. It's making your speaker work halfway back, so there's a drop in power. This is called a DC offset. Now there is a tool that can fix this. DC offset removal. Done. That's fixed. But because it had tried to fix its own offset, what we're going to do is remove the start and remove the end, where our offset removal has created a new offset up here. So we'll go to everywhere that was fixed, and this is now a repaired bit of audio. We have one sample of someone walking through snow, so we need to chop this up a little bit so we can create multiple people in different places at different times. The way to do that is we create new tracks. We're going to create 2 mono tracks. Now this is a stereo track, so it has a left and a right. If we put onto 2 mono tracks, we separate the left and the right, and we now have 1 single track. We're going to break this into sections. That's a 16-second section. That seems about right. Let's go with that. There. So we now have multiple samples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to put some fades in these so it sounds like the person's walking closer and then walking away. Firstly, they'll walk in close and then they'll walk past. We'll do a similar thing with all of them. So now these will start to sound like someone walking closer. And that person walks away. So now we have a collection of these. We know that there's not many people out in the streets in Waterdeep these days. So let's spread them out. Let's pull this guy a little earlier. And we're going to do the same as what we did with the horses. We're going to group them and loop them. Now, we know we haven't used weather 2. So we can hide that. We haven't used weather 3, so we can hide that. Because we're going to be mixing, we need to label all these areas up. So this is high wind, low wind, walking, and horse. Let's see what Waterdeep sounds like. Keep an eye out on these 2 faders for the sound coming in of people walking and the horse passing. That is essentially the main steps that I go through to build up all the parts that I need to create a soundscape. Now, this one has been a little different because a majority of it has already been made in the other sessions. But basically when I did the spring, the summer and the autumn versions of these, I did a very similar thing and simply added different elements of weather and amounts of horse and carts and things like that for the autumn when they were bringing in all the produce at harvest. I added a lot more birds in springtime, a lot more boats in the summer. You could hear the docks a bit more. That's a sort of basic overview of a small part of the process I'll go through when I'm making these soundscapes. Major parts of it that you didn't get to see were me picking these sounds. That's most of the work, is picking the sounds out of all the huge library I have, finding the right ones, finding ones that I know I can modify. And I'm going to spend another maybe about an hour, hour and a half perhaps, replaying this and adjusting little things to give the whole thing a full feel. I may even add more footsteps to come in more often. One of these winds started to sound almost like a car, so I may remove that section and try and find another wind perhaps. So there's a lot of playing about that goes afterwards, but this is generally how it's done. So I'm going to leave you this small clip of Waterdeep in winter. So thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed, please drop a comment below, hit like. If you do enjoy the content I'm putting out, please hit subscribe. And if you'd like to support me, I do have a Patreon page which will be in the description below. Thank you very much, and the full version of this will be out on Friday.